For now, this should be the last podcast of the series on evolution and climate action. It's a very interesting topic, and I am convinced, based on my little research with all these papers and additional books and material, that we cannot really focus on global sustainability, collective action, sustaining the commons, and so on, without understanding where we came from, evolutionarily speaking. What our sorry, but what our intrinsic characters are. So this is a paper from the same collection that talks about continuities and discontinuities in the cultural evolution of global consciousness. There is a huge debate about what consciousness is, whether it's real. So in this case, it's reduced to a quantifiable measure of consciousness, and we'll see what that means. So it's not this esoteric thing, but something practical, can be measured, and we can look at its variability with age, with cultural affinities, with the cohorts you are with, and with the life experiences you go through, and so on. I mean, it's a complicated paper in terms of the sampling, the modeling, and the story is uh, nice. So I'll just summarize it into a few main results again. Please go and read the paper if at all you're interested in this topic. So let me bring up the abstract and we'll read a few more points. Global consciousness encompassing cosmopolitan orientation, global orientations, that is openness to multicultural experiences and identification with all humanity is a relatively stable individual difference that is strongly associated with pro-environmental attitudes and behaviors, less in-group favoritism and prejudice, and greater pandemic prevention safety behaviors. So this was done just before COVID in terms of the sampling and the surveys, so we have to be careful, but pandemic prevention safety behaviors are related, and obviously that translates to climate action, pro-environmental behavior, and pro-social behavior. Little is known about how it is socialized in everyday life. Using stratified samples from 6 societies, socializing institution factors correlating positively with this definition of global consciousness, where education, white collar work, and its higher income, and religiosity. Obviously, sampling bias could come from where the study is done. However, GC also decreased with increasing age, contradicting a wisdom of elders' transmission of social learning and not replicating typical findings that general prosociality increases with age. Longitudinal findings were that empathy building, network enhancing elements like getting married or welcoming a new infant increased GC the most across a 3-month interval. Instrumental gains like receiving a promotion or getting a better job also showed positive effects. Less intuitively, death of a close, death of a close, other enhanced, maybe probably less intuitively, death of a close other enhanced rather than reduced GC. Perhaps this was achieved through the ritualized management of meaning, where a sense of the smallness of self is associated with the growth of empathy for the human condition as a more discontinuous or opportunistic form of culture-based learning. So this is part of the theme issue, evolution and sustainability, gathering the strands of an Anthropocene synthesis. So, obviously it's still in the same stream of thought. So let's just go through it. Introduction, I'll read briefly. The past century has witnessed such unprecedented, multifaceted, and pervasive human-driven planetary change that a working group of the International Geological Society recommended that the Anthropocene be established as a new geologic epoch with a start date in the mid 20th century. by the time we are recording this, this proposal had been rejected. The signal event of the Anthropocene is climate change manufactured by human activity, with average planetary temperature projected to rise by 2.6 degrees C by the end of the century. This environmental unsustainability of the current trajectory means that theories of cultural evolution centering around continuities of intergenerational social learning could usefully be augmented by a political psychology that identifies moments of potential and actual discontinuity that could be leveraged for social, institutional, and personal change. So this is, again, has to be taken in the context of what we've been saying, that we evolved to be a certain way, and how we cooperate, how we compete is all related to intergroup, intragroup, etc. But we also said cultural changes are possible with field interventions for mitigative actions, pro-social behavior with reduced inequality, and so on. So again, let's assume that personal change is possible. We discussed global consciousness as an individual difference, especially adaptive for the human species to survive and thrive in the Anthropocene. GC and the related concepts are strongly related to pro-environmental attitudes and behaviors and cross-national cooperation. We review that macro features of society induce GC to grow or decline, but argue further that discontinuity in individual and collective lives might open up a window for reconceptualizing the forms of experiential meaning that gives rise to GC as we defined here. In the words of Charles Darwin, as cited in Richards, although a high standard of morality gives but a slight or no advantage to each individual man and his children over the other men of the same tribe, yet that an advancement in the standard of morality and increase in the number of well-endowed men will certainly give an immense advantage of one tribe over another. So intra-group variability in morality versus the group morality can have a very different impact on fitness within the group versus fitness of the group against other groups, right? So take it for what it is. This work builds on efforts to develop quantitative measures of what McFarland ecumenically termed global human identification and citizenship. So this is kind of what we mean by GC here. These encompass a wide range of measures that arguably fit with Liu and McDonald's other paper definition of GC, their definition as a knowledge of both the interconnectedness and difference of humankind and a will to take moral actions in a reflexive manner on its behalf. GC is cosmopolitan, incorporating global pro-sociality, a willingness to help others, regardless of whether they share an intergroup in an again. A willingness to help others regardless of whether they share an in-group with the self, and respect for and willingness to preserve cultural diversity. It is fundamentally open towards acquiring knowledge about other cultures, other people, and other life ways. It's called being open-minded. We don't want to say liberal conservative because conservative people can explore the world just as well as liberal people. Conversely, GC is not defensive about maintaining ethnic purity or anxious, fearful about interacting with other different from oneself. So no xenophobia or hatred of other religions groups. GC includes a feeling of we-ness, the identification with all humanity, including both bonding with and concern for all humanity, measured as a composite. GC has good test, retest reliability, so reproducibility, and predicts cooperation across national boundaries on a range of behavioral indicators rather than being narrowly defined by a particular theoretical orientation or literature. Most relevant to the current research is it is a person-centered measure that allows researchers to track personal change longitudinally as a function of life experiences. Okay, so I don't know how much of this I want to read, but here basically we examine how learning affects GC. We examine how learning affects GC correlationally through one's position in societal structures that reproduce social learning over the lifespan, and dynamically through longitudinal analysis of the occurrences of major life events that may result in disruptions and discontinuities in the immediate short term in the GC as we are looking at here. Okay, so the results basically look at relationship between global consciousness and demographic, they would call wave one, and relationship between global consciousness and life experiences, they call wave two. So just looking at the results here, low global consciousness, medium, and high, looking at age groups and the kind of income levels versus percentage of GC profiles that were sampled. So proportion of GC profiles in different age groups and occupations, as we said, with age, high GC actually is not guaranteed. So the wisdom of the elders, maybe it has evolved in some other context. Maybe experience being stated as what to do and what not to do is being interpreted as wisdom, whereas it is not what uh, accounts for global consciousness. Okay, so just keep, and of course, incomes matter. And if you look at life experiences on overall advance rate of global consciousness, those who experienced this event and those who did not experience this event. So you are looking at marriage or new relationship, new family member. So people who experienced had a higher jump in advancement of the global consciousness as we define here. Job promotion, close, others died. Educational achievement, close, others ill. Financial setback, new or better job. Relocation, divorce, relationship troubles. You can see then those who did not experience this event have a better global consciousness. So at some point, the experience can be negative in this sense for empty nesters, retirement, new activities, job insecurity, etc. So to jump to the end, as humanity moves into the Anthropocene epoch, it is apparent that industry as usual is unsustainable. One factor opening up possibilities for a more sustainable future is the emergence of global consciousness. Given its relative weakness compared to more established forms like national or local identities, GC cannot grow simply through social learning and imitation, though such forms of cultural continuity have a place. This research found that several established institutions across 6 societies contributed to GC in a significant way. These were education, white collar work, and the higher and more regular income associated with it, and religiosity. So you have to obviously think, if income is important for GC, then does poverty degrade it, or does poverty create suspicion of the rich people and inequality that may come with it, and so on. Some culturally continuous aspects of industrialized society can contribute to GC, but there is also discontinuity, the most obvious evidence of which is the decrease of GC with increasing age. This is not good news if you ask me. I'm getting old, but I always thought I get wiser. This suggests a cohort effect where younger people are learning from their peers and through mass media rather than imitating their elders necessarily, which may be good news. Compensates for the fact that elders are becoming deficient in GC or losing their GC as they grow older, so young people can learn GC by associating with peers. The more innovative but also more tentative part of this research revealed that both positive and negative life experiences contributed to the growth of GC over the 3-month longitudinal period measured. Not surprisingly, positive empathy building, network enhancing elements like getting married or welcoming a new infant were the most GC enhancing events reported. Instrumental gains like receiving a promotion or getting a better job also showed positive longitudinal effects where you are comparing the same group. If I have too much, yeah, that's the last page. I have to run for lunch. I'm getting hungry. If GC is a cohort effect rather than a maturation effect, so elders don't become more GC, then it must be tied to specific forms of learning and experience in this era. A higher and more regular income affords a wider range of experiences and access to things that may serve to expand horizons. Education can be mind-opening in any era, but especially true in the present one when innovations occur regularly and are documented so they can be institutionally transmitted to a new cohort. These may be features of cultural evolution in the Anthropocene, where all sorts of innovations are regularly recorded and widely disseminated. GC may be particularly adaptive in an era where access to innovation is easy. If you have the wherewithal, poor people may not be necessarily uh, getting the information, and the rewards of being open to new people and things generally outweigh the risk of encountering the unfamiliar. This is true when you look at refugee problems. That may not be necessarily true, but this may again depend on having a good job and income rather than competing with jobs for immigrants or feeling insecure about losing a job to an immigrant and so on. But GC is more than a product of power, plenty, security, and industry. It's also a vessel for meaning making, where forming a marriage, adding a new family member, or losing a beloved are used to articulate wider forms of interconnectedness that might be discontinuous with what went before. DC appears to have a fundamentally social component to it that may be a product of evolutionary origins. Here we are with evolution again. It appears oriented to not only expanding human social networks, this was a critical element in the rise of our species, to planetary dominance, and may become an important element of our shared future, where we learn to craft more sustainable narratives about ourselves. So, will shared experiences or hearing about other people's experiences about climate impacts, floods, droughts, fires, cyclones, earthquakes, whatever, will that make us more GC, more globally conscious, and whether that will lead to more pro-social behavior and environmental worrying about the environment, but this still doesn't get to collective action at a global scale. So we are still struggling with intra-group dynamic versus intergroup fitness by having a higher GC. Does it scale up to global levels? That's still a key question that we need to understand in terms of, uh, let's say, limitations of evolution versus our ability for cultural evolution as opposed to just genetic evolution, and our ability to drive directed evolution. Are we able to realize that we must get together for collective action and grow our GC to a level where we become, capable of collective action despite our evolutionary baggages? So let's leave it here. And as I said, this is a series that ends with this book, this particular paper. I'm not going to add much more. I think we made enough points. So if you want to follow up, you can follow up with other books and papers. There is a lot of material. Each paper we looked at here has a long list of references, which are very nice. I wish I could just sit and read those for 30 years, but unfortunately we have to move on. Okay.